Hey, Julia Barzyk here from Wise Investigator. I wanted to record this video today to supplement some information that I'm putting out in my newsletter that's coming out tomorrow morning. So that's part of a series of newsletters that's focused on helping you prepare for the new funding opportunities and the short turnaround funding opportunities that we're seeing. So by new, I mean a new solicitation for a new opportunity or a new program that hasn't existed before. Something like NSF Career is not a new program. You have good guidance on how to prepare for that. There's institutional knowledge around it. You might have examples of successful proposals that you can use to inform preparation of your own proposal, etc. But with something like the Genesis mission from DOE or NSF X Labs, these are new opportunities. And in the case of these, you need to be ready to prepare for them quickly because they also often have short turnarounds. And you need to be able to communicate what you want to do to an audience that is far outside of your area of expertise, most likely, especially at the early phases of the selection process. Now, what's the little anecdote here? Okay, so I'm on a mailing list of research development professionals, and there were some emails coming through in the last couple weeks about a major foundation that is changing the way it interacts with prospective PIs. They are no longer going to have meetings, face-to-face meetings, whether that's in person or on Zoom or even over a phone call with prospective PIs. And this is significant, right? Because the in-person opportunity to connect is very valuable. You can communicate a lot in that time period. And if you use those meetings effectively, you'll end up conveying the important information about the research that you want to do, but either directly or indirectly, you'll also communicate something about your story, why you're motivated to do the work. And the person will have a chance at the very least to hear your voice and maybe see your face and have that human interaction. And it's so valuable for, again, for understanding the story of where someone's coming from and therefore why they want to do the research, and they're well suited to do the research that they're proposing. So I can go on another little anecdote tangent about what this means for funding organizations. It's actually what has been happening for a long time. And remember that I worked inside a funding organization, and we're starting to see more and more of the manifestation of that now. But I'll come back to that. So just hold on to that for a second. And I'll continue to say, what is going to replace that in-person contact? Well, a couple things. One would be that people are going to rely more on the information that's already out there about you. And that is the usual. It's your website, your LinkedIn profile, your Google Scholar, etc. So these need to be up to date. They need to be current. I have lots of resources on how you can improve those. So I'll link to that. But my point here in this video is to communicate a very real example of how the opportunities for in-person interaction are going away. And there is going to be something that replaces that information that people used to get from you in that kind of setting. And again, it's going to be what's online. So the other kind of information that they're going to get is through staff who know you at your institution, like research development or foundation relations staff. So your online presence needs to be clear to the funders, and it also needs to make it clear who you are within your own organization, because there's only probably fewer than a dozen people who are working in your combined research development, foundation relations offices, and they're going to be the ones who may be representing you to the foundations in some cases. So your online presence is also what they are going to use to learn about you at least at first glance, to possibly pass on information about you to the foundations. So when something like the in-person opportunity goes away, it's not that the information that they were getting from those interactions, they still need that information. They're going to get it from somewhere else. So what you want to do is make sure that this information is consistent across all the platforms so people don't get confused, because when you say you're at one institution here and you live in a city over here that's not where that institution is, you say you're at University of Georgia, for example, but it says you live in San Francisco. Okay, that's confusing to people. So when they get confused, it lowers the trust. And so it's not that anybody thinks that you're making things up or you're being intentionally dishonest, but it doesn't help their first impression, and it doesn't help just ease the communication and kind of the psychology of the entire process of just feeling like I know something about this person when they're getting that conflicting info. So first of all, make sure that everything is consistent, and then make sure that you're portraying the information that you want to about where your research is going. So not just about what you did in the past, which is more what you communicate on a CV or a bio sketch, but where you want your research to go, because that's what funders want to talk to you about. They're really not concerned about what you did in the past. They're concerned about what you're going to do when they fund you. Okay, so the other little anecdote that I wanted to get to was kind of broader, just about what is going on within the funding organizations that has already been happening for many years. And as we come under increased strain, and as more time passes, this is just going to become more obvious. And what might have been hidden behind the scenes is now going to be more obvious to everybody. It's kind of like having that dirty laundry aired, or maybe that's what they call it. And I want to make it very clear here that this sad situation that we are kind of in right now, honestly, is not the fault of anyone within these organizations. There have been changes going on in the government in hiring of federal employees for a long time, even before we had this new administration that we have currently, which made a lot of changes within the federal government. So what I'm talking about here is when I was hired to work in ARO, which was Army Research Office, which was now about 13 or 14 years ago that I started there, that there were a number of federal employee staff members who served in support roles to the various divisions within the organization. And these were people with literally decades of experience in the administrative processes that were required to move money out of the organization. And their wealth of knowledge was very, very great. And especially as a new person, you really rely on those folks. I mean, everybody in the organization relied on them, that's for sure. But as a new person, I certainly relied on those people to explain to me how certain processes work and to help me with the paperwork that was required to get anything done. So over time, those people were retired. And because of changes in the federal government, again, that's been happening for a long time, they were not replaced with federal employees. They were replaced with contractors. So that meant that there were people in the roles, but of course they were new because they were newly hired. They work for companies that will have a contract with the organization for, 2 years, 5 years, something like that. And then another company will come in. So these people were full-time employees, but they're not federal employees, and they often were switching out every couple of years because the contractor jobs generally weren't as desirable as the federal employee jobs. They might not pay as much money, or they might have a lower ceiling for what you could be paid, and they didn't have all the federal benefits and all of that. So understandably, those jobs were not generally staffed by someone for more than a few years. Now, even the number of those positions that were there to support people that were the technical staff, right, were going down. And so my point is that there is less and less support staff within the organization. And for example, when I started at ARO, I was having a lot of support with things like travel. And now I know over the time that I was there, I was having to do more of the travel related stuff myself. And I do know of people in the government who will spend, hours and hours on the phone with making travel arrangements. And these are like your program managers, right? Whereas 10 or 15 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. Or if they did have to call and make their own travel plans, probably someone would have picked up the phone a lot more quickly, and it would have actually gotten resolved more quickly. So these are all strains that have been going on within these organizations for a very long time, and it's becoming more apparent that the effects of these changes, along with everything else. As another kind of anecdote, right, haven't we seen that NSF is doing a lot of hiring now? So that's great. Maybe the staff numbers will go up there. We'll get some experts in, but am sure that a lot of those people that are hired newly into NSF, they're going to have great technical expertise. I don't have any doubt, but there's just no way that they're not going to have some assignments that relate to managing proposals that are not in their number one technical area of expertise. There's just too much work to be done and frankly, too few people to do it. So you're always going to be dealing with something outside your expertise. So for those new people, you can help orient them by being very clear again about what you do, and they will Google you. And it's totally fine if they're looking for reviewers or they just want to learn about a field to Google PIs and learn about them that way. Now, as for proposal reviewers, they really only should be looking at what's in the proposal. But we know that people do work on their computer. They've got a couple screens open or they've got their phone there and they are going to Google you, right? So let's just be real about this. If they're not going to be able to meet you as often as they used to, if people are, excuse me, overworked and understaffed, then they're going to be relying on shortcuts. And the shortcut is what they find about you on the internet. So please check out the newsletter that's coming out tomorrow. I'll link to my newsletter sign up page below and start working on up-leveling your online presence.